Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. The CDL is no doubt very top heavy going into the upcoming season. Enable from 100 Thieves is not happy at all about some of the roster building that he is seeing lower down in the field, saying that some of the construction is straight up terrible. Octane says that many of the teams down there have a very low ceiling indeed. MettalZ also revealing one of the OpTic potential Challengers-esque teams going into the new season. Lots to dive into this evening. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, let's talk about this tournament on the 18th that is upcoming. So this is clearly quite a big one because many pro players and content creators, as they're technically called, are talking about this tournament on the 18th. The only way I can think about the way this tournament works is that you're allowed 2 pros, and quite often those 2 pros will be from the same team. That's what they'll like to do. I mean, the game has just come out. Ideally, that's going to be the case. But you know how the CDL goes. We're not allowed to have the entire rosters play at the start of the game, so they have to team up with other guys. So 2 of the pro players are allowed to play together with a Challengers player and a content creator. That apparently is the way that you've got to form your team of 4. So, you know, as Simp said the other day, need an AR from Challengers and a content creator, like for the tournament on the 18th with myself and HyDra. Then Simp gives an update yesterday and says, need a sub player, must be a content creator and good at S&D. So I guess they've found their AR from Challengers. Now they need an SMG content creator. I think it's funny, the content creator stuff, right, and even the challenger stuff. Basically, anyone would qualify as a content creator. Like, Scump is a content creator. But also, what if Scump says, you know what, I'm playing challenges. Now he's a Challengers player. So maybe there's doors that could open here, for example, for the OpTic team. Now, it's quite possible that Shotzzy and, of course, Pred might also team up for this tournament and do a separate team. Not so sure about that yet. But Kenny and Dashy are going to play with JurNii as their content creator, and of course he retired last season from the professional league, and now they need a Challengers player. And this is, as obviously aBeZy replies, I thought it was kind of funny just to think that, all right, Challengers player, what does that mean? Does that have to be a player that played in last year's Challengers? But what if it's a brand new player that's 18 and cracked, they've only just turned old enough to play this year's Challengers? Surely they should qualify as well. So why, if aBeZy was to say, oh no, I'm a Challengers player, I'm going to be competing in a Challengers at the start of the season, what's to stop them getting aBeZy in? Maybe they wouldn't want to, and maybe they'd say, oh no, well that's 2 content creators, but it's such a grey area on this stuff anyway. Like, you know, Karma could be considered a Challengers player if he said that he was going to grind it, as could Scump. So, yeah, I don't know what their plan is exactly, but still, that is the OpTic, not exactly Challengers team. We know that there's the kickoff team, I think, is meant to be Pred, Shotzzy, JurNii, and Scump. And then there's this version of the team that needs a 4th right now. Of course, kind of all OpTic guys, Kenny, Dashy, and MettalZ. Then again, I was just thinking, right, a lot of ARs here, right? Like, they really do need some SMG presence on this roster with JurNii, Dashy, and Kenny. I mean, yeah, I guess Kenny's going to be on the SMG here, but could be pretty brutal. I guess it's going to be search and destroy, so maybe it's going to be fine. But this does still seem like a pretty big tournament, right? Because everyone's talking about it lately. We'll see how it goes. I saw Dashy as well playing a lot with HyDra over the last few days. They've been playing lots of Halo, which is, it's kind of ridiculous how good these guys are at every single game that they touch. But got to talk about some of the roster building for the new year, because those 2 teams respectively, obviously OpTic and New York, should be some of the finest, no doubt about it. Further down the field, yes, there were reduced options in terms of which players could be signed, but I think that probably half of the other teams have done a solid job. The other half I'm not so convinced about, to be honest. And this is where you would really love to be on one of the top teams. I thought it was kind of interesting as well. If you're the GM of a brand new franchise, who do you sign as your captain? It's an interesting question because, you know, maybe Cellium is the most consistently dominant player here, but I mean, HyDra is, like, it's interesting because Cellium, there's lots of good ARs, if you know what I mean. There's very few dominant SMG players, such as HyDra, and even to some extent, such as Pred. That's probably why I would lean one of their ways. And I'd probably, to be honest, I'd probably take HyDra, really, given the current circumstances. And, you know, reigning world champion, MVP, best player in the game. It's difficult to do that on a sub. I'd probably take HyDra personally, but one of these 4, or really any player from one of the top 4 teams, is not a bad shout. When you get further down the grid, that's when it makes things slightly more challenging. So Octane gives his thoughts on this and says that the new Carolina team, he actually doesn't hate it. He thinks that it's pretty good. He likes Real. He likes, of course, GodRx, and he thinks that Clay is great. But nonetheless, the team is going to have a relatively low ceiling. The team, all these teams are having a low floor. Like, I think there's no doubt that basically any team from the top 4 down can have a top 12 stinker. And it's even possible one of the top 4 teams has a top 12 stinker. It happened last year. It might well happen again. But the floor on a load of these teams is top 12. The ceiling, though, that's the question, because a team like Boston, if they really get things going, Slasher, Priestahh, obviously Snoopy and Capsidal, that team's ceiling is... You know, I think they could possibly even make a finals with that team. Definitely a championship Sunday is possible. And, you know, maybe Los Angeles Thieves as well. Lots of the other teams I'm looking at and thinking, well, if they make a championship Sunday, they've done really well. And, like, top 4 is their absolute max. And some teams, I would say that, you know, top 6 feels like the max they're really going to achieve. This is what Octane says. Then we'll look at Enable's point of view.
Probably said, what's your thoughts on the Carolina roster? Head empty, man, though. I think their team could be good, but team could also be bad. I think their team has a relatively low ceiling, but I think all of the bottom 6 teams have a low ceiling, so it's not really saying much. TBH. Okay, they're ass? No, I don't think they're ass. I do think Godorex and Real are very good. I think Clay is a very, very good player, so I don't think they're ass. But again, the bottom, all of the 6 through 12 teams are just low ceiling IMO.
So this is what Enable says on the questionable roster building of some of these teams. I understand CDL teams don't want to shell out cash, but some of the team construction is absurd. So I wonder which teams he's talking about here, because let's be honest, lots of these teams that have formed rosters recently, even if they shelled out cash, could they have got anyone better? Like, okay, sure, if you're Surge or something, maybe you could have said, you know what, HyDra, let me give you the biggest bag in COD history to come and play for us. Like, is that what Enable wants to do? I don't really know, because you look at some of these teams formed, and it's like, well, if they paid more money, would they have gotten better players? I'm not necessarily sure they would. Lots of these teams are trying to simply get for any amount of money, and to be honest, at this point, the players would probably take basically anything in offered to actually just get a CDL spot. And, you know, they've tried to do the best with what they've got. So I'm not so sure it's a cash issue. Yes, the teams are not necessarily cash rich anymore, and some of them are trying to significantly cut back on how much they're paying, but I don't think that some of the poor rosters that we might have been seeing be built is necessarily a cash problem. It might just be straight up poor decisions in roster building. But yeah, Enable still says some of this team construction is absurd, i.e. pretty terrible, and Enable reckons he could do a far better job of it. So the 2 most recent teams that we saw, like this is October 27th, so you would think that he's talking about these teams, at least to some degree. We saw that tweet from TJ the other day saying, oh yeah, these rosters this year are fire, they're straight fire. Like, you know, obviously not being convinced that these guys are doing a good job. These were the 2 most recent ones. As I say, I quite like what Ravens are doing, like Clay, Godorex, Real, +1. We're talking about Gwyn nowadays as their potential 4th, and I kind of agree with Octane. Like, I like the pieces there. Okay, maybe not an incredibly high ceiling, but given the options, it's okay. But it's like if you're Ravens and you did have insane bag, like to dish out, who would you even get instead? Everyone else has been signed. Legion I'm slightly more questionable on, really. Like, you know, Purges, the flex roll there, attaches. I mean, you know, there's other players that I would have looked at. We looked at that team earlier today with, you know, Beans and Nasty and Bance and Hixie, those guys, you know, a lot of them champions in their own right. And you might well have thought about one of those options instead, but, you know, I don't really hate what these guys are doing. I wonder if Enable's more so looking at maybe even an organization that he was on previously. Of course, he was on the Seattle Surge for some time, and well, okay, he was only on there for like a year or so before he decided to call it a day in the CDL, and you know, he walked out with the bag, to be fair, because Surge at that time were paying big money. But yeah, of these teams, okay, Ravens we don't know yet, Legion we don't know yet, they're okay. Heretics to me is actually really interesting. I don't know where to put them. I think that, again, they're one of these teams with like a top 12 floor and maybe like a top 6 ceiling. Like, they were good as Heretics way back in Black Ops 4, and it is a very similar team now. But as I said, there are other players, you know, Super and Real, like other Spanish players that are arguably better than some of the guys that they have, which does confuse me on the direction they've gone, because if you're going to make a Spanish team work to try and, you know, make Championship Sundays, you'd think you've pretty much got to stack the 4 best Spanish players on one team, and I'm not necessarily sure they've done that. Of course, OpTic and Subliners and FaZe and Ultra, there's not many questions about those rosters. Breach as well have done a good job. Thieves, I think, you know, considering it's okay. Thieves, I have my questions on, I'm not going to lie. The more I think about it, the more I think that some sort of internal personal conflict might cause issues there. I like what they've done with the SMGs, I think, but I'm just not sure how this ghosty Cammy thing is going to go. I'm really not. And I don't think that this was necessarily Thieves' first choice in terms of the roster they were trying to build. Obviously, you know, we did hear Thieves linked to aBeZy and maybe even Lins as well. They then went their separate ways. aBeZy went to Surge. Lins has gone to the Minnesota Rocket. Another questionably built roster. So the more I look at this league, really, the more I think that it's going to be more and more top heavy than maybe I originally gave it credit for, possibly. Because, yeah, I don't know. Thieves has potential, but I think there's a lot of potential risk there in whether Ghosty and Cammy get on in and outside of the game. Maybe there's even other issues with that roster as well. Rocket, I'm not convinced, to be honest. I at least look at the SMG duo of Afro Joe Deceives, and I look at the SMG duo even of like Nero Standy on Legion, or even like, you know, Gwyn and Real on Ravens, and I'm just not sure that Lins and Vivid is necessarily the one, but yeah, maybe Lins can show up well. Obviously, Accuracy Awakening, like that team is just kind of weird to me, and then Surge, so many questions there about whether it's going to work if there's actually any SMGs being used on the map at all. So I do agree that looking at quite a few of these teams, there's some that I think, yeah, the roster construction is very strange here. And to be honest, I look back on seasons like Cold War and I think, well, FaZe were really good there. But many of the other rosters were just underwhelming or poorly built, or there were serious issues. And usually I go into the new season thinking, all right, these teams have done something relatively sensible. But the more I look at these teams, the more I think, well, the top four is just going to be so much better than everybody else. But I'm very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section, but I do agree with Octane that the Carolina team is good, maybe not good enough, or is Enable right that, yeah, some of the roster construction here, maybe even from his own organization, is highly questionable going into the new year. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.
One's back green. I'm behind the city yet? Nice. One's behind you, like low green. Pillars. Hit him 3 times. One more. I'm so on. Oh wait, that's not even here. I'm hopping the shit, dude.
No, I didn't even have ammo for anything. What the fuck?